Let's just focus on Lee Anderson's words this week, because whenever this country has a cost of living crisis, his is a narrative that we seem to hear constantly. The right-wing press, and let's face it, every comfortably middle-class MasterChef fan on Twitter seems to think that escaping the sucking abyss of grinding poverty is a simple case of learning how to batch-cook casseroles, so I'm keen to hear your perspective on how realistic that actually is.
Well, it's really very simple, Sam. To understand the mindset of people like Lee Anderson, with the tendency to be deliberately and dishonestly selective about the actual realities of being poor, there's really only one thing you have to remember. These people are almost always, entirely and without exception,
Right, that's your impartial journalistic assessment of the situation, is it?
It is. And here's the thing you need to understand about Sam. Are almost always self-righteous in their cuntiness, constantly seeking approval from other by saying increasingly cunty things that make them all feel better about being are also singularly incapable of considering that they may, in fact, even be in the first place. And instead of looking inwards and recognising their inner they assume that the failure of other people to achieve their privileged level of absolute is somehow a moral failure on their part. You know, rather than a direct result of being repeatedly beaten down by a ruling class consisting of an absolute shower of It's uncomfortable for a to contemplate that they may have had a hand in causing the poverty that like them have inflicted on the poorest in the country for in years through their policies. So instead, they blame the poor themselves and try to make this suffering a question of individual responsibility. By doing so, they convince themselves and their friends that it's those that they are hurting who are the true and they slap themselves on their backs and merrily carry on being forever. Thus, my friend, do we unearth the etymological roots of the phrase, a trick. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Well, as gloriously florid as that was, Danny, I'm not sure that bombarding people like Lee Anderson with insults is going to do much to convince them of the power of your argument.
Touché, dear boy, but please, allow me my riposte. Pray tell, what sort of person dismisses another's argument simply because it has a few choice words in it?
I think I can guess what you're going to say, Danny, and I think you need to...
It's Sam! It's always
Yes, thank you. I'm more than aware of my own comment sections. But let's just try and engage with Anderson's argument, rather than his character then, shall we?
Really? If you think you can untangle being a from the suggestion that exploding poverty has more to do with poor people's inability to bake potatoes rather than his party's fiscal policies, be my guest.
Well, let's look at what Anderson has actually said, both in his original comments and subsequent doublings down. He's claimed that there's not actually a massive use of food banks in this country, as is often claimed by the press.
Except the Trussell Trust figures show that they gave away over 2 million food packages in the 12 months up to last April, and around 832,000 of them went to children. As each package contains food for 3 meals a day for 3 days, that's 19.5 million meals in total, and 7.5 million just to kids. But I guess those kids just need to learn how to cook and budget properly, like responsible 4-year-olds.
He also argued that at some point you have to stop throwing money at a social problem and instead look at the root causes of those problems.
Which are currently benefits completely failing to keep up with rampant inflation, poverty wages, insecure work, a healthcare system on its knees making it impossible for many ill people to find a route back into work, an end to the pandemic amnesty on benefit sanctions, the cutting of the 20 quid boost to universal credit, and needless delays to the initial payments for claimants that then trap them into a poorly explained debt spiral when they have to accept an advance loan on the benefits just to survive. All of which is Tory policy, Sam, meaning Lee Anderson is the root cause of the social problem he doesn't want to throw any more money at, but he doesn't seem to want to take any individual responsibility for that at all. When sanctions weren't being imposed and universal credit was 20 quid higher during the worst of the pandemic, and struggling families were being offered vouchers for free school meals throughout the holidays, food bank use was going down. Now it's shooting through the roof with all the economic and social costs that come with that level of poverty.
Hang on, just let me finish. Anderson also said, and I quote, "Once somebody finds out they can actually cook meals relatively cheaply, it's a lot cheaper than spending money on junk foods and takeaways and the chip shop." Oh, hang on, I hear it now. Yeah, he's a cunt.
See? I told you!